I was supposed to be 3 states away, so neither of them knew I was watching when it happened. The words echoed in my skull as the wipers dragged slowly across the windshield, pushing thin streaks of rain back and forth like tired soldiers on patrol. 5:43 p.m. glowed faintly on the dashboard clock, that dull green light reflecting against the fogged glass. I sat in the rented Ford, engine off, parked across the street from my own house, watching the front windows burn with that warm orange living room glow that used to feel like home. Tonight, it felt like a theater, and I was in the audience. I had told everyone, with careful casualness, that I was flying out to visit Ron Mathers in Colorado, a man I served with in the Air Force 40 years ago. 14 days, I'd said. Bags by the door before sunrise. A cheerful wave to David and Olivia as they stood on the porch pretending they cared whether I came back. I had done everything right except leave. Something had been gnawing at me for weeks. Not a sound, not a moment I could point to, just a feeling. That subtle, tightening instinct the military drills into you after enough years of being responsible for things that break when you're not paying attention. So 20 minutes after the taxi left the neighborhood, I circled back in a rental car instead of heading to the airport. I parked across the street, turned off the lights, and waited. I didn't expect celebration. Through the rain, through the glowing window, I saw them. My son David and his wife Olivia, standing in the living room popping a champagne bottle like they'd just won a championship. Liquid sprayed across my carpet, my walls, my memories. They laughed, not the harmless kind, the relieved kind, the triumphant kind. Olivia tossed a handful of papers in the air, her red hair whipping as she spun. Finally, we don't have to babysit the old man for 2 weeks. I felt something deep in my chest go still. Not pain, not anger, just absolute clarity. David laughed, shaking his head, picking up one of the pages drifting to the floor. He's dumb to ever catch on. Dumb. After 34 years of fixing aircraft engines, building a small auto shop from nothing, paying off their student loans, helping them with a down payment, dumb? My palms sat flat on the steering wheel, trembling so hard the leather vibrated under my fingers. Inside, they clinked champagne glasses and moved around the room like children home alone for the first time. Olivia strutted with confidence, that exaggerated, careless walk people get when they think no one is watching. Then she disappeared for a moment, toward the hallway that led to my study. My breath caught. When she returned, she was carrying my leather briefcase, the one I never left unlocked, the one they weren't supposed to touch. I leaned closer, forehead to glass, ignoring the cold. Olivia placed the briefcase on the coffee table with a deliberate slam, like she owned it. She opened the clasp, the metal catching the light, and began pulling out sealed folders and business documents, spreading them out like playing cards. My voice came out in a whisper I barely recognized. "What are you two doing with my files?" The rain softened for a moment, or maybe I just stopped hearing it. My mind jumped to my will, to the business transfer agreements, to bank authorizations, power of attorney drafts, all the papers that lived in that briefcase untouched for years because I trusted my family. David leaned over the documents, scanning through them, shaking his head with a manic sort of excitement. Olivia poured more champagne. "This is it," she said, tapping one folder. "We just needed him gone for 2 weeks." David laughed, that smug laugh I'd pretended not to hear for months. "You're a genius, Liv. Seriously, he has no clue." They toasted again, glasses raised high. My throat tightened. I cracked the window just enough to catch their voices. I needed to hear it. I needed to know what they thought they were celebrating. Olivia said it first. 14 days, everything will be processed before he comes back. David lifted one specific sheet in the air, a signature page I couldn't fully make out from the street. He held it like a trophy. In 14 days, everything will be ours. He shouted it, loudly, joyfully, not worried about neighbors, not worried about anything. And in that moment, 5:43 p.m. on a rainy Tuesday, sitting alone in a rental car while my own son toasted to my disappearance, I knew the 2-week trip wasn't the test. This moment was. And they had failed it spectacularly. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't even step out of the car. I just sat there, watching the glow of the house through the rain, memorizing the sound of their laughter, because I knew, soon, very soon, that sound would stop, and I would be the one to stop it.
I grew up in a house where discipline wasn't a choice. It was the air we breathed. My father woke us before dawn, whether it was a school day or not, and if we didn't make our beds sharp enough to bounce a coin, we did it again. Honor, loyalty, and duty weren't words, they were expectations. I didn't resent it back then, and I don't now. That kind of structure builds a person. It forged me into someone who doesn't leave when things get uncomfortable, someone who holds a promise even when it hurts. That's how I lived my whole life, and that's how I loved. I met Grace when I was 24, fresh out of the Air Force, stationed in Texas. She was a nurse, soft-spoken, brown-eyed, the kind of woman who remembered everyone's birthday but forgot her own appointments. When she laughed, she covered her mouth like she was afraid someone might try to steal the sound. I fell in love with that laugh before I even admitted it to myself. We married 2 years later. Our son David arrived soon after. Our whole world shifted the moment he took his first breath. Not because parenthood is a fairy tale, but because Grace and I were a team. We decided who we wanted to be as parents: present, steady, patient. Even when I worked long shifts on military bases, Grace made sure David grew up with stories of honor instead of absence. And then, 12 years ago, in the middle of what should have been a normal Tuesday, she collapsed in the hospital hallway. Sudden cardiac arrest, no warnings, no time for last words. I still remember standing in the hospital waiting room, hands shaking, uniform drenched in sweat, while someone asked me whether she'd want to be buried or cremated. I remember thinking, I'm too young for this question. She's too good for this ending. But life doesn't negotiate. From that day on, it was just me and David. I did what men like me always do. I went to work. Not because I didn't want to grieve, because I didn't know how to. I built a business out of aircraft repair, starting in a rented warehouse with 2 tools and a stubborn refusal to fail. I worked nights, weekends, and birthdays. I skipped vacations. I missed chances at love because I couldn't imagine opening my life to someone who wasn't Grace. But I never missed providing. By the time David graduated high school, the business was pulling in numbers I never imagined. Contracts with private aviation companies, commercial clients, even air medical services. I bought a house with a big porch and space for a piano because Grace always wanted one. Her piano still sits in the corner of the living room, untouched since the funeral. Some things break you once, and that's enough. Sarah, my sister, has always called it my museum of loyalty. She's 58 now, sarcastic on the outside, sentimental on the inside. She never let me sink completely into isolation. One night, years ago, she came over with Chinese takeout and dropped onto the couch like she owned the place. She looked around the room, the framed medals, the neatly arranged books, Grace's piano, and sighed. "Pat, you've got to live while you're still living." I didn't look up from the reports in my lap. "I am living. I'm keeping this family running." She scoffed in that sisterly way of hers. "You're keeping the lights on, not the heart." I didn't have an answer, so I just told her I'd think about it. I didn't. I focused on David. I paid for business school when he said he wanted to learn corporate leadership. I was proud, even nervous, that maybe he'd someday run the company better than I ever could. I covered the rent on his first apartment so he could focus on school. I paid off his wedding debt when he and Olivia decided they wanted something Instagram-worthy, as they put it. I didn't mind. Parents do things without needing applause. But somewhere along the way, the sacrifices stopped being invisible and became expected. I didn't notice the shift right away. It's funny how change sneaks in like weather. It starts subtle, then suddenly you're standing in the middle of a storm and wondering how you didn't see the clouds forming. I remember the first dinner where I noticed Olivia had a certain command about her. Elegant, confident, ambitious. I don't fault ambition, but hers came with a hunger for control. She shook my hand like she was sealing a business deal, not joining a family. "It's an honor to finally meet you, Patrick," she said with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. During dinner, she asked about the company, but not the way someone asks out of curiosity, the way someone takes inventory. Richard laughed more loudly when she laughed, agreed more quickly when she spoke. He wanted her approval the way a younger version of him wanted mine. It didn't alarm me then. It just shifted something. As the years passed, the man who used to fall asleep on the couch beside me during late-night action movies started leaving early from Sunday dinners. He listened less. He listened less. Grace used to say people change like seasons, slow, expected. But David changed like a pulled curtain, sudden, unapologetic. I noticed small things. When I offered advice about a business contract, "Dad, the world doesn't work like it did in your day." When I suggested we go fishing like we used to, "Maybe when things calm down." When I asked how he'd been, "Fine, busy." I asked once, only once, if I had done something wrong. He blinked at me like the question annoyed him. "No, Dad, you're just intense." Intense. I had been called many things. That one stayed under my ribs. The truth is, I was afraid of being alone. Not alone in the house. I've known silence for years. Alone in the world, without someone to carry memories of Grace with me. I didn't want David to just be a son. I wanted him to be a friend, a man who chose to stay in my life, not just inherited it. But I convinced myself I was imagining the distance. Maybe I'm being too sensitive, I told myself late at night, staring at the ceiling. Maybe I need to stay out of their way. Maybe this is what growing up looks like. Richard Barnes, my family lawyer since Grace's passing, met with me every few years to update documents. He always said the same thing while adjusting his glasses. "Patrick, you have a solid estate. You've taken care of things." I thought I had. I thought paperwork protected loyalty. I thought raising a child with love and sacrifice meant he would remember it. I kept telling myself their tone was stress, their impatience was exhaustion, their distance was adulthood. I chose to believe the best of them. Maybe because it was easier than admitting something else, that I wasn't losing my son. He was letting go of me. And for years, I looked the other way. Until the night in the car, when looking away was no longer possible.
I stayed at a budget motel off Highway 47, the kind with humming neon signs that flicker like they're unsure whether to keep trying. Room 112. Thin walls, damp carpet, and the smell of old cigarettes, even though the sign on the door insisted non-smoking. It wasn't far from my house, 11 minutes without traffic. Just enough distance to disappear, not far enough to feel gone. Every night after dark, I drove back. I parked in different spots, down the block, around the corner, behind hedges. I'd killed the reflex to turn on the interior lights. Military training never really leaves you. For 7 days, I watched the house like a ghost haunting the living. On the third night, I stood beneath the maple tree near the back fence. Through the kitchen window, Olivia held a dinner party. 6 guests with wine glasses, polished silverware, and laughter far too loud for a Tuesday. I watched her glide around the room like a queen in a borrowed castle. A woman in a designer coat asked, "So this is your place? It's gorgeous." Olivia smiled proudly. "Yes, it's ours. We've been waiting so long to really settle in." No mention of me. No trace of hesitation. David chimed in, resting his arm around her waist. "I basically run everything now. Dad's, well, he's old and confused. He's earned his rest." The guests nodded sympathetically. I stood in the shadows, every word landing like a dull hammer against bone. Later in the same evening, Olivia held up a glass of wine and said, half joking, half revealing, "Honestly, he's our retirement plan." Laughter followed, loud, thoughtless. Nobody questioned it. My hands had gone numb from the cold before I forced myself to walk away. 2 nights later, I went to my office after everyone had left. The security code at the main entrance was unchanged, a mistake on their part. Inside, the lights hummed softly, and the smell of engine oil and metal polish tugged at memories of better years. I walked past the framed photos of clients and certifications like a man walking through his own obituary. The door to the conference room was ajar. I stepped inside and froze. The contract binders were gone. So were the financial logs I always kept in the filing cabinet behind the projector screen, the ones attorneys need to transfer business ownership. An empty groove in the dust marked where they had been. I walked to my office next and found the desk drawers half full, half missing. The keys I kept locked in a hidden compartment were gone. Footsteps echoed behind me. I snapped upright. "Mr. Hall?" Emily, the receptionist, stood in the doorway with her purse on her shoulder, already halfway out the door. I forced a smile. "Just grabbing some documents I forgot." She looked uncomfortable. "I thought you were on your trip." I nodded once. "Change of plans." She shifted, lowering her voice. "David and Olivia have been running things while you're away. They said you're stepping down because your memory hasn't been good." My jaw clenched. "I see." Emily swallowed. I didn't say anything, sir. I know you're sharp. We all do." I put a hand on the desk to steady myself. "Thank you." She opened her mouth as if she wanted to say more, then closed it and left. When her footsteps faded, the room suddenly felt too small to breathe in. The 6th night, rain came down hard, sheets of water over the patio stones. That didn't stop the dinner party. Olivia had strung fairy lights across the pergola, and soft jazz played from the outdoor speaker system I installed 2 summers ago. I watched from behind the fence, rain soaking through my jacket, dripping into my eyes. One of the guests asked, "So how's your father-in-law doing? I know you're taking care of him." Olivia raised her glass dramatically, mocking pity. "To taking care of elderly parents." The table cracked into laughter, genuine, unrestrained. Even David smirked, shaking his head like he found it harmless. I gripped the wooden fence so hard the splinters cut into my palms. I didn't feel it. I was somewhere between numb and burning. When Olivia excused herself to get more wine, I saw her through the sliding door. She passed by the piano. Grace's piano. She didn't look at it. Why would she? It meant nothing to her. They were celebrating my absence, celebrating access. I stayed there in the rain until the last guest left, and David kissed Olivia at the door like the world belonged to them now. When the lights finally dimmed, I went back to the motel. I couldn't remember the drive. The next morning, the motel phone rang. I stared at it for a long time before answering. "Dad?" David's voice was sugar-coated with concern. "Hey, just checking in. Everything okay on your trip?" I stared at the water stain on the ceiling, a perfect circle like a target painted above me. "Everything's fine," I said calmly. I heard faint laughter in the background, Olivia's voice. "He's buying it. Keep going." David cleared his throat awkwardly, pretending she hadn't spoken. "We just miss you, you know. Want to make sure you're doing all right, enjoying yourself." "Son," I said quietly, "is everything all right at home?" Yeah, everything is great. Just wanted to hear your voice." I let a silence hang, long enough for him to sweat, not long enough to expose myself. "Well," I said finally, "thank you for calling." "Of course," he said, "any time." He hung up fast, too fast. I sat on the bed, phone still in my hand, and listened to the motel hum. The refrigerator clicked on, the old AC rattled to life. The world outside kept moving, while mine stalled in place. That night, the 7th night, I parked down the block, walked up the alley and crouched behind the hedge by the living room window. The curtains were slightly open, likely from Olivia showing off the interior earlier. I saw them at the dining table, just the two of them. No guests, no audience. A serious conversation. Olivia leaned over her laptop. "Once the paper's clear, we list the house. Big buyers love this neighborhood." David nodded. "And once the company transfer is finalized, we'll have enough liquid assets to invest." Olivia sipped her drink. "We just need him gone long enough for everything to push through." David exhaled like a man tired of pretending. "I hate the act, calling him, playing nice." Olivia shrugged. "It won't matter soon." He hesitated, just a moment, like a flicker of doubt. "What if he comes back early?" Olivia laughed. "Then we lie again. He believes whatever we tell him." I stayed still. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. I didn't make a sound. I studied them like strangers. Not the son I raised, not the woman I welcomed, just two opportunists carving up a life they didn't build. I stood there until the lights went out. Then I walked to the car, my shoes crunching on wet leaves. I didn't slam the door. I didn't curse or cry or punch the steering wheel. The pain wasn't loud anymore. It was quiet, cold, surgical. They thought they were winning. They thought my absence made me weak. They thought 14 days were enough to erase a lifetime. They had no idea who they were dealing with, and I had no intention of stopping them early. The deeper they dug, the deeper they would bury themselves. I waited until their car pulled out of the driveway. 7:12 p.m. The garage door sealed shut behind them, Olivia laughing at something David said. I didn't follow. I stood there in the dark, a long time, watching the tail lights fade, timing how long it took for the neighborhood to go quiet. Old habits, patience before action. Then I walked up the driveway. My key still worked. A small mercy, or maybe just arrogance on their part. They thought they already owned the place. Inside, the house felt unfamiliar, too clean, too staged. Scented candles instead of Grace's eucalyptus. Throw pillows I didn't recognize. Pictures of David and Olivia in places Grace and I once stood. Even the air felt different, like someone had opened windows to let my memory out. My shoes didn't make a sound on the hardwood as I went down the hallway to my office. I paused at the door. My hand hovered over the knob. I took one slow breath, then turned it. The room had been ransacked with care, the kind of organized robbery meant to leave no trace. The desk drawers had been quietly rearranged. The filing cabinet was locked, but the spare key, hidden behind the third medical book on the right shelf, was missing. I sat at the computer chair and looked at the surface of the desk. Neat, polished. And then my eyes caught the corner of a folder half tucked beneath a ledger. Not sloppy, just hurried. I pulled it out. Company Transfer Agreement. Updated. David Hall, sole successor. Below, 2 signatures, mine and David's, side by side. But the one above David's, my name, wasn't mine. There were similarities, enough to fool the lazy or the greedy, but there were small imperfections. A forged signature always trips over the subtle movements, pen pressure, spacing, the way a loop closes. You can fake handwriting, you can't fake muscle memory. I swallowed hard and pulled another document from the folder. Power of attorney, durable, immediate. Decision-making authority, David Hall. Effective upon medical finding of cognitive decline. And then the worst piece. A stapled medical assessment form printed with the letterhead of St. Anne's Memory Clinic. Diagnosis box checked. Progressive cognitive impairment. Possible early dementia. Not true. Not remotely true. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. I touched the paper, not to verify it, but because I needed something solid under my fingers, like touching a wound to know it's real. I wasn't done. Olivia's laptop sat on the corner of the desk, open but asleep. I moved the mouse and the screen flashed awake without needing a password. Carelessness or pride. Her email inbox was on screen. The first message that hit me was time-stamped 2 days ago, 11:14 p.m. To Attorney Linda Cooper. Subject, finalization timeline. Once the POA is finalized and the elder evaluation is submitted, the judge will force the transfer. No delays expected. Olivia. I scrolled. Another, sent to a friend, someone named Violet. We'll care for him until everything is legally ours. Then we move somewhere better. Smiley face at the end. Something inside me went still. Not numb. Still. Like deep ocean water before a storm. I shut the laptop and leaned back in my chair, and stared at the wall. My breathing came shallow, almost non-existent. For a moment, the sound in the room faded. No rain outside, no hum of appliances, just silence pressing against me. It wasn't the betrayal of money. It wasn't the house or the business or the forged signatures. It was that they planned to bury me while I was still alive. I don't know how long I sat like that. Minutes, maybe an hour. When I finally moved, it wasn't emotional. It was precise, deliberate. I stood and went to the hallway closet where I kept the access panel for the home security system. I opened it and loaded the memory card from the camera archives into my laptop. I skimmed through date-stamped footage, conversations in the living room, kitchen, study. Then one recording stopped me cold. David pacing, phone in hand, talking to Olivia. I'm telling you, he'll forget everything eventually, and if he doesn't, we'll make it look that way. He didn't say it with malice. He said it with indifference, like it was logistics, not cruelty. Another clip. Olivia whispering, when he slips up even a little, we call the doctor again. Paper trails don't lie. David laughed. He trusts us completely. He won't see anything coming. I paused the footage at the frame where my son smiled. That face, the boy I raised, the man I hoped he would become, gone. Pain was still there, but behind it something sharper formed. Not rage, not revenge. Clarity. I plugged in a flash drive. I downloaded every file, every email, every recording. I printed hard copies and stacked them in labeled folders, dates in the corner, timestamps underlined. Every lie had a digital footprint, and I collected them all like a patient hunter. When I was finished, the desk looked like a legal war map, sordid evidence, itemized reality. I picked up the phone and called the only person I trusted with this, Richard Barnes. He answered on the first ring. "Patrick, I thought you were out of town." My voice was steady. "Richard, I need you in lawyer mode. No hesitation." He heard something in my tone. Maybe the steadiness, maybe the absence of fear. "What happened?" I found forged signatures on the company transfer, a power of attorney naming David, a falsified medical assessment claiming cognitive decline. Jesus Christ! Paper shuffled on his end. "Are you safe right now?" "Yes." "Do they know you know?" "No." He exhaled slowly. "Good. Then don't confront them. Not yet." I wasn't planning to. There was a pause, long enough to communicate respect. "Patrick," he said, low and controlled, "everything you've described is illegal, criminal. But if you confront them privately, they'll deny, destroy evidence, panic, maybe claim you're unstable. That plays into their narrative. The truth needs witnesses." I nodded to myself. "I understand. I'll start drafting motions immediately. This will have to be revealed publicly, a judge, a court clerk, maybe even law enforcement. Tell me what to do." "For now," he said, "nothing except keep collecting proof. Let them think you're gone. The more comfortable they get, the more they incriminate themselves." I looked at the printed folders, the recordings, the emails, the signature pages. Proof wasn't the issue anymore. Timing was. "Richard," I whispered, "I raised him. I loved him." Silence answered for a moment. Then, "I know, and because you loved him, you won't destroy him. You'll let his actions destroy themselves." I closed my eyes. Grace's piano sat only inches from the office door. I could almost hear her voice. "Do the right thing, Pat, even when it hurts." "I won't confront them," I said, "until the world is watching." When I hung up, I gathered all the evidence into a locked briefcase, the same briefcase Olivia once opened with celebration. And as I walked out of the house, locking the door behind me, I finally understood. They had counted on my love to make me blind. But love wasn't my weakness. It was my motive. The shareholder meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp. David had planned it that way. First quarter review, business strategy, and a special announcement regarding new leadership. I knew because I had seen the email he never meant for me to see. Cars filled the company lot. Employees in pressed suits, investors with polished veneers, reporters with cameras itching for headlines, all funneling into the lobby like it was the premiere of a movie. I watched them through the tinted SUV window for a long moment before stepping out. I hadn't worn my Air Force dress uniform in years. The fabric no longer hugged the body I had in my 20s, but it still carried the same authority. The medals on the chest weren't decoration. They were a conversation stopper. And they stopped every conversation the moment I walked through the front door. The room went silent so quickly it felt unreal. Laughter and chatter cut off like someone had pulled the plug. Even the faint ticking of the wall clock pierced the hush. David stood near the doors to the conference hall, wearing the tailored suit I bought him for his first executive meeting. Cameras flashed around him as employees clapped and congratulated him. Until they saw me. His smile froze mid-performance. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Olivia turned, face twisting before she fixed it into something polite. She recovered quicker than he did. She leaned toward a couple from the investor group and whispered just loud enough. "Patrick wasn't supposed to come. He's not well mentally." A guest's sympathetic frown answered her whispered. A wave of whispers rippled outward. David stepped toward me, hand hovering near my elbow like he meant to guide a confused old man back outside. "Dad, let's talk privately." I didn't move. His fingers tightened, pressure edging into control. "Come on, Dad, this isn't the place." Before he could guide me away, Olivia raised her voice toward the crowd, loud, confident, rehearsed. "Patrick shouldn't be here. His health has been declining, and this transition has been very difficult on him." There it was, the public narrative, the one meant to lock me out forever. I didn't answer with words. I lifted a single brown folder and turned my head toward the AV booth. The technician, who'd been informed in advance, saw the color code and pressed the cue button. The screens behind the stage lit up in total silence. First, company transfer contract, digital copy, showing my forged signature next to David's. A wave of gasps. Someone swore under their breath. Second, email from Olivia to attorney Linda Cooper, the one that read, "Once the POA is finalized and the elder evaluation is submitted, the judge will force the transfer." A murmur of outrage rolled through the room. Then the audio. David's voice blasted across the speakers, clear as thunder. He's too dumb to ever catch on. The room shook into chaos, chairs scraping, voices sputtering disbelief, cameras firing like machine guns. David spun toward the screen in horror. "Turn that off! That's private! That's illegal!" No one listened. Then a second clip, Olivia. "We'll care for him until everything is legally ours, then we move somewhere better." Her own voice echoed across the conference hall, cold, casual, unmistakable. Employees stared at her like they were seeing her for the first time. The business partners she'd charmed leaned away from her like she carried poison. I stepped onto the stage, slowly, without rush, and took the microphone. My voice didn't need to be loud. Quietness has weight when the truth stands behind it. I may be old, but I am not confused. The room erupted, but not with applause, with questions. Voices collided at once. Is this real? How long has this been happening? Did David know? Olivia, what did you do? Olivia snapped. This is fake. He's senile. He edited this footage. He's obsessed. You have no idea what it's like taking care of him. David grabbed her wrist. Olivia, stop. Just stop. She yanked away. You ruined everything. If you had just stayed gone, none of this would have happened. Her mask was gone. Panic stripped her clean. Shareholders shouted. Employees documented every second on their phones. A dozen conversations crashed at once. Outrage, shock, betrayal. In the middle of the chaos, David's voice broke. Dad, listen, please. Olivia pushed this. I didn't... Olivia wheeled on him, eyes venomous. You begged me to do it. You said you were sick of waiting for him to die. Gasps cut across the room like cracks across glass. David paled, then turned to me, tears forming in a last-ditch performance. Dad, she's twisting it. I swear, I didn't look angry. I didn't look wounded. I looked steady. David, I said quietly, a good man doesn't let someone else talk him into evil. His face crumpled. Dad, please. Employees parted as security came forward. They didn't need instructions. The moment was obvious. 2 guards took Olivia by the arms when she tried to bolt. She screamed at them, at me, at the cameras recording it all. You can't do this. I earned this. You're nothing without us. She fought all the way out the doors until her voice swallowed her. David didn't run. He looked like he had fallen off a building in slow motion, pride and certainty shattering piece by piece. Richard Barnes walked into the room then, flanked by 2 legal clerks. He stepped onto the stage next to me with a calmness that cut through the noise. He spoke to David, not cruelly, not kindly, just formally. "David Hall, you are hereby removed from payroll, stripped of all management privileges, and barred from accessing internal systems while the investigation proceeds." He placed 2 envelopes on the podium, official, embossed, unavoidable. "And this," Richard added, "is a restraining order. You are not to approach or contact your father, his residence, or his business." For a moment, David just stood there, head down, chest shaking like he couldn't breathe. When the guards approached, he didn't fight. He didn't look at Olivia, she was already gone. He didn't look at me. He only whispered one word before they walked him away. "Why?" I didn't answer. The question wasn't for me. He wasn't asking what I did. He was asking what he lost. When the room finally stilled, I turned back to the podium. My hands rested on the wood, knuckles relaxed. I looked out at faces that were no longer celebrating, but listening. This company will remain strong because it was built on work, not entitlement. No one moved. No one interrupted. You can run a business without love, but you can't build a legacy without it. The room stayed silent, not out of fear or shock, but respect. I stepped back from the microphone. I didn't smile. I didn't bow. I didn't celebrate. I simply left the stage, the same way I entered, upright, steady, whole. David moved out within days of the shareholder meeting. It wasn't dramatic. No police lights, no slammed doors, just a quiet morning when he packed bags into his car without looking back. Olivia didn't help. She had already moved into a furnished apartment downtown and filed for divorce 3 weeks later. Their lawyer blamed irreconcilable differences, but the settlement emails made it clear. She didn't want a husband, she wanted a ladder, and once it snapped under her weight, she simply found another rung. David's downfall was slower. Some days he called me furious, voice shaking with indignation. "How could you embarrass me like that? Do you have any idea what you did to my reputation?" Other days, he called sounding broken, like a child after a nightmare. "Dad, please, I just need to talk. I didn't mean for any of it to go that far." He alternated. Rage, guilt, silence, rage again. I didn't block him. I just didn't answer. Not yet. Finally, I sent him one letter, handwritten, 3 sentences. "I love you, but I won't be your victim. When you become a man I can trust, my door will be open, not before." He never replied, and I didn't expect him to. Some truths don't land immediately. They echo. At the company, the dust settled in its own rhythm. For a while, employees walked softly, afraid even to laugh in hallways. But gradually, the energy changed. People breathed easier. Meetings felt collaborative instead of competitive, and the tension that had crept into every corner evaporated. One of David's first decisions months earlier had been to cut employee support programs, the mental health therapy stipend, the family emergency fund, even the holiday bonuses that meant more than the money itself. It was bad business disguised as efficiency. Reinstating those programs was the first thing I did when I returned to the office. During the announcement, I didn't give a speech. I just said, "We take care of the people who take care of us." The applause wasn't loud. It was steady, genuine. That mattered more. The second change came 2 months later. At a leadership summit, I introduced the new COO, my niece, Sarah, 58, sharp-tongued, sharp-minded, and loyal without servitude. She stood at the podium in a navy suit and greeted the room. My job isn't to replace anyone. It's to make sure the right people always have a seat at the table. People admired her instantly, not because she wanted power, but because she respected responsibility. She stopped by my office that afternoon and leaned against the doorway. "You sure you're ready to hand some things off?" she teased. I grinned, ready and grateful. She stepped closer and softened her tone. "Pat, you're building again. I'm proud of you." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Richard Barnes finalized the last of the legal protections soon after. Signatures, witnesses, court filings, layers of paper that formed a wall between David and every asset or decision he once tried to claim. Richard slid the final document toward me across the table during our last meeting. "This secures everything permanently. Even if someone pressures you later, even if someone tries again, the company is legally insulated." I scanned the page, but didn't really need to. I trusted Richard in a way I once hoped I could trust my own son. I said, "Thank you," quietly. He gave a nod. "You don't have to say it. I know." He left without lingering, the way a real friend preserves dignity. The house took longer to feel like mine again. For weeks, I walked through it like a stranger. Cautious footsteps, careful glances, waiting for an echo of betrayal to jump out of the walls. But houses are patient. They wait for you to breathe again. One evening after work, I poured a cup of tea, turned off every light except the lamp by the piano, and sat down beside it. Grace's framed photo rested on top. Her smile soft, her eyes quiet, like she knew something I didn't. Rain tapped gently on the windows, not like the storm from the night I stood outside, but like a rhythm of calm. I spoke out loud, without realizing I was doing it. "I didn't win, Grace. I just stopped losing." The room didn't answer. Rooms don't need to. I rested my hand on the closed piano lid. I hadn't opened it since the day she died. Tonight, I didn't open it either. Healing doesn't mean rushing. I just sat there, a man not triumphant, not broken, simply present. The soft light reflected against the medals stitched on my uniform jacket hanging nearby, the jacket from the shareholder meeting. I wasn't keeping it out as a trophy. I just hadn't put it away yet. Some battles don't celebrate themselves. They just end. I sipped my tea, slow and quiet. I didn't know when or if David and I would reconcile. I didn't plan it. I didn't rehearse it. Love isn't a contract. It isn't leverage. It isn't debt. If he ever returned with honesty, he wouldn't find a locked door. But if he returned with entitlement, he wouldn't find a father who bowed. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of being alone. I realized I wasn't alone at all. I had a business full of people who respected me, a sister who refused to let me disappear, a niece who stepped up not for inheritance, but responsibility, a lawyer who stood as a shield when I needed him most. And I had myself, not confused, not fading, not finished. I sat beside Grace's piano until the tea turned cold. Not mourning, not plotting, just healing.
8 months passed. Time didn't heal everything, but it softened the edges. like water smoothing stone, not erasing it. The house felt lived in again, not restored to what it was, but grounded in what it had become. I hosted a small backyard barbecue one Saturday afternoon. Nothing fancy, just burgers, folding chairs, sunlight warming the grass. Employees chatted near the grill, laughing about office stories with a freedom that had been missing for years. Someone brought potato salad. Someone else brought homemade cookies. No speeches, no pressure, just people being people. Through the open patio door, the sound of a piano drifted across the yard. Sarah sat inside at Grace's piano, fingers moving gently across the keys. Not performing, just playing. The notes floated out into the afternoon, settling into the air like memory without ache. I stood near the grill flipping burgers when the noise around me shifted. Not quieter, just different. I looked toward the far end of the yard. David stood there. Hands in his pockets, clothes simple instead of styled, posture small rather than confident. No cameras, no performance, no Olivia at his side. Just my son, sober, unsure, and visibly afraid of taking up space he hadn't earned. He didn't approach. He stayed near the fence as if waiting for permission to breathe. Conversations around the yard continued. No one stared, no one whispered. 8 months had taught the company its own boundaries. I wiped my hands on a towel and walked over. We didn't hug, we didn't shake hands, we didn't pretend. He kept his eyes down until he finally spoke, voice soft, stripped of entitlement. I need to earn my way back. No excuses, no deflection, no begging for the past to be forgotten. Just accountability, the first step of something that might one day resemble forgiveness. I nodded once. That's a good place to start. His eyes lifted, not hopeful, not relieved, simply understanding. He didn't ask what the next step was. He didn't demand timelines or reassurances. He just nodded back. We stood there in shared silence, not comfortable, not hostile, honest. After a moment, he exhaled shakily and stepped back. I'll see you around. Take care of yourself. He left without lingering. I watched him walk down the side gate and disappear down the driveway. Not broken, just beginning. I didn't feel victory or triumph or closure. What I felt was something steadier, alignment. Love without denial, boundaries without bitterness. The party wound down slowly, dishes clattering into the sink, goodbyes drifting through the hallway. By sunset, the house quieted. The piano lid closed gently. The back porch lights flickered on. Later that night, after everyone left, I sat alone on the porch with a glass of water, listening to the wind move through the trees. Not lonely, just still. I thought about the months behind me, the courtroom filings, the repairs at the company, the rebuilding of trust in small, steady measures. But most of all, I thought about what love really was. I used to believe love was protecting someone from consequences. Now I know love is letting someone face the damage they caused and decide if they'll rebuild. Some people never will. Some people someday might. Love isn't forcing a happy ending. It's leaving the door open, but not carrying them through it. The next morning, before sunrise, I stepped outside still in my robe and slippers. The air was cool enough to bite a little. The sky hadn't chosen a color yet. Somewhere between blue and gold. I walked to Grace's rose garden, the one she planted in the first spring after we bought the house. For years I hadn't touched it, afraid of getting it wrong. This year I tended it every weekend, pruning, watering, learning. Not to preserve the past, but to care for something she loved. I pressed my fingers into the cool soil and watered the roses slowly. The petals glimmered in the first hint of sunlight. The wind moved gently across the yard like a quiet reminder. Life doesn't go back. It goes forward. And that's enough. I stood there watching the garden awake with the morning, breathing in the calm, letting it settle where old adrenaline used to live. Sometimes the quietest victories are the loudest truths.